LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is without a doubt the most ambitious and imaginative LEGO game that I've ever played. At times, the sheer ambition of the project seems to have been at the forefront of development at the expense of a couple of mechanics you'd take for granted, but with a plethora of new ones which really add to the experience. And make sure you stick around to the performance segment of this review, where we'll look at frame rates, visual quality, as well as docked and handheld modes. Can the Switch provide the path of the perfect Jedi? Or Obi-Wan cannot be? Well, let's find out. As the title suggests, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga covers the full timeline of the Star Wars series, and you can start out at the very beginning chronologically, or play from the beginning of each of the trilogy of movies. As we've seen in some recent LEGO games, there is full narration, and these aren't the original voice actors, but they still do a very good job. The narrative follows the films extremely closely, sometimes at the detriment of gameplay. There are certain scenes which, on screen, are good enough to watch, but when you have to play them out, such as moving from one side of the Gungan base to the other and then back again, it isn't quite as enjoyable. Now with that said, each and every environment can then be played in free play mode with loads of secrets to unlock. The storytelling isn't just vocal though. TT Games have become experts at weaving that non-verbal slapstick comedy that you expect, and in Skywalker Saga, this happens parallel to the other proceedings. The voice acting extends to a number of side characters, and certainly within the context of this game, it works very well, which takes us onto gameplay. And while I'd argue that some previous LEGO games were kids games that could be enjoyed by adults, this one feels more like an adults game that could be played by kids. They've included a number of additions for navigating this vast world, which incidentally features dozens of planets that you can visit as well as their moons, but so many systems have been refined. Let's start out with the combat. Combat is based around several different classes: Jedis, Dark Jedis, Rogues, and the combat system has seen a number of refinements. There's a light and heavy attack, with an on-screen combo gauge to reinforce the learning of new sequences. During combat, some enemies will require you to change your tactics. If you're spamming them with the Y button, they might begin to block, and you'll have to mix things up a bit. If playing as a Jedi, you can hold your X button to initiate some force moves, such as panicking the enemy, or the very cool mind control ability. Through this, you can directly control your enemies and have them fight against each other. There are other moves the Jedis can perform, such as throwing the lightsaber from a distance, or deflecting energy weapons, and even countering Dark Jedi Powers. Some classes have blaster weapons which can be controlled directly, and the aiming of these can be adapted, and I intuitively went to move the controller to do gyroscopic aiming, and unfortunately that's not present here. What you can do though is change all of the sensitivities, the X and Y axis, and the amount of auto lock-on. It's pretty easy to shoot from range. The strangest omission in a game filled with so many mechanics was the lack of a lock-on ability for melee combat. It seems like a no-brainer to have you click the left stick in and it lock onto the nearest enemy. It's by no means a difficult game to control, but this would have made things a little more fluid. Despite this, the new combat mechanics are really enjoyable, with a few quick time events thrown in, such as an on-screen prompt to press a button just at the right time, and the different classes add a lot of variety to the experience, and each of those have their own skill trees. These can be entirely ignored, and for younger players, I should imagine that's probably the route they'll go, but for those looking for more of an in-depth experience, you can use all of the collected cogs to upgrade universal things like the run speed, or you can delve directly into individual skill trees, improving Jedi abilities, making it feel more like an RPG. While the storyline will guide you through what feels like quite a linear path, you soon realize that you can travel wherever you want. Once you've visited a planet, you're free to explore numerous secret areas, items and quests, and a quick glance at the number of these available gives you some idea of the scope that the game offers, and you'll not just be exploring it on foot. There's an entire space-based section that holds a wealth of its own mechanics. You can fly to the orbit of a planet, spend some time mining asteroids, you can even fight star destroyers, and take part in some truly epic battles. And not all of those are scripted. Although I haven't captured footage for it, there was a time when a star destroyer warped into the area, and I had the choice of whether to fight it, run away, and some of them can even be boarded. As with previous titles, the game can be enjoyed in split screen throughout the entire experience. This is a drop-in, drop-out multiplayer, and it works well enough. When one player reaches the next story destination, the other can simply press the A button to join them, without having to traverse wherever they've gone to. The experience features a number of boss encounters. These include a mixture of puzzle solving, quick time events, and your standard combat. Some worked really well, while others felt a little bit elongated, for want of a better word. Such as the bounty hunter fight in the asteroid belt, where he'll hide on the side of an asteroid, only for you to discover him, and the combat will begin again. That was fine, and it was great for the first time it happened, but when it's repeated 3 or 4 times, just essentially to extend the experience, it affects the pacing of the game. Despite these misgivings, the Skywalker Saga offers fans and non-fans an incredibly fleshed out world. Tons of side content to explore and so much potential replayability. It's hard not to recommend it. Each hour you play, you'll experience an entirely new mechanic that must have been incredibly difficult to implement, and without going into that, there were issues. So many of these succeed in giving you that childlike feeling of never knowing exactly what's going to come next. I believe that one of its biggest criticisms might actually end up being the difficulty level for some younger children. No, it's not a difficult game, but it can be a touch vague at times. How much longer do I have to do X? Am I in a position where I can now reach that area? They're things that adult gamers would take for granted, and sure, TT have included a lot of visual markers and objective symbols, but having watched my kids play it, there were more than a few times where they had to turn and say, what on earth do I do next? How much that impacts the overall gameplay score, I don't know. It's an incredibly enjoyable experience, but I will repeat, this is an adult's game that kids can play as opposed to the opposite. I give gameplay 18 out of 20. Bar not having the ability to lock on during melee combat, the controls are almost perfect. There are a number of options for tweaking and changing things. Space combat doesn't feel like a tacked on addition, and the puzzling and exploration that you're so used to with this franchise is as fun as it ever was. Controls also score 18 out of 20.
I repeat, I need backup.
The Skywalker Saga uses the TT engine. That's the in-house engine created by Traveller's Tales, and which by all accounts has been incredibly challenging to develop for. Why aren't they using Unreal Engine, you ask yourself? Well, I'll leave you to decide on that one. The issue here is that the development team had no real experience of working on such a grand scale with the new engine. Many of the team knew how to use Unreal, and it meant that lots of things that they previously took for granted with Unreal Engine now took much more time. With that said, it still looks very nice on the Nintendo Switch at times. There seems to be a dynamic level of scaling here. In some areas when playing solo, you're looking at 30 frames per second and a reasonable resolution. However, when you split that screen and you're playing 2-player co-op, some planets will see a significant drop in performance, down to 20 to 25 frames per second. Space combat, on the other hand, seemed mostly unaffected, maintaining 30 FPS, and the engine seems capable of some really nice lighting effects, such as the reflective qualities of some surfaces, some nice transparency, and some decent shadowing. In handheld, things, in my opinion, look far better, and playing on the Switch OLED was a real delight. To the credit of the developers, they've gone to real efforts for the Switch version. Every single text size can be changed. You can change the text size of dialogue bubbles, including a preview, which I would love to see in every game, and there are accessibility options to the nth degree. As far as damaging your storage, well, the game's going to take up 14 gigabytes when it's fully installed to your Switch. Artistically, everything is spot on. There's so much detail packed into every scene, it's still enjoyable to play on Switch. From an audio standpoint, things are mostly fantastic.
Well, it's either that or I don't eat this week. I won't be much.
The ebb and flow of John Williams' original score punctuates proceedings perfectly, but also the way music is dynamically changed based on what's happening on screen adds real gravitas to everything. The vocals being provided by the live-action Star Wars films cast were spot on, and the audio fidelity across the board is a real strong point.
The dark side I sense in you.
With particular credit having to go to iconic roles such as Yoda, voiced by Tom Kane, and unbeknownst to me, this is actually his last time voicing that character due to an unfortunate health incident. While visuals and performance do need a patch, I still think they're very serviceable on the hardware we have here. They score 15 out of 20, and my only critique in terms of audio are some moments that feel overly sparse as regards their soundscape. They're few and far between, but they're quite noticeable. Audio is still exceptional. It scores 19 out of 20. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is going to set you back £49.99, and it absolutely should. It has ridiculous amounts of content, tons of unlockables, and some of the best replayability that I think I've seen in any game in a long time. The open world formula works perfectly, and you'll be surprised by the amount of depth the experience offers. I'm only knocking 1 point off of value because of the current performance issues, and it needs improvements there. But as a package, you will not be disappointed. Value scores 19 out of 20. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is the best LEGO game ever created. A hugely ambitious project that throws everything bar the kitchen sink at the player. The RPG mechanics, the open world, and the ability to enjoy the whole experience with someone else. If you're a Star Wars fan, you owe it to yourself to play this game. It gets a SwitchUp score of 89%. Okay, so that's the review of Star Wars. Are you going to be picking it up? Is it a game that you've been looking at? Honestly, it's the most fun I've had with a LEGO game, and I'm really impressed with what they've done. Thanks to all of you that watch the channel. I hope this has been of some use to you. And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!